Hello, and welcome back to another Ask the Experts telecast sponsored by The Record, NorthJersey.com, and the USA Today Network. Hello, I'm Mike Kelly. Today we will examine a vitally important topic: how the vaccines to battle the COVID-19 pandemic are going to roll out in New Jersey, and what people need to know to make their decisions about taking those vaccines. To help answer some of those questions, we have three distinguished guests. Dr. Brian Strom is a physician and the inaugural chancellor of Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences and the executive vice president for health affairs at Rutgers University. Although Dr. Strom's interests span many areas of clinical epidemiology, his major research interest is in the application of epidemiologic methods to the study of drug use and its effects. He is recognized as a founder of this field and for his pioneer work in using large automated databases for research. Dr. Shobha Swaminathan is also a physician. She is an associate professor of medicine at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School and the clinical research site leader for clinical trials for the clinical trials unit at the medical school. She is also the medical director of the infectious diseases practice at University Hospital in Newark. And finally, I'm joined by my colleague, Lindy Washburn, the award-winning medical writer for The Record, NorthJersey.com, and the USA Today Network, New Jersey. Lindy has been covering the COVID pandemic all year, and as readers know, she volunteered recently to participate in one of the vaccine trials. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. But let me begin with Lindy. Lindy, I know you want to talk more about your vaccine trial later in this program, but just quickly, how are you feeling?
Oh, I feel fine. I'm perfectly fine. Yes, thank you.
Can you bring us up to some of the latest news on where we stand with the vaccine rollout?
Certainly. The news has been breaking really quickly on the vaccine front with the American government and the Murphy administration in New Jersey moving very rapidly to make the vaccines available to the public. The Pfizer vaccine is up first, and as early as tomorrow, the scientific advisory panel to the Federal Food and Drug Administration will be meeting to review the evidence about that vaccine's effectiveness and to make a recommendation to the FDA. As early as this weekend, it's possible that shipments could be going out to hospitals across the 50 states. Some hospitals in New Jersey, including 2 in the Rutgers system, have already received vaccines to be in position in advance and to test out the logistics of Operation Warp Speed. The second vaccine produced by Moderna, the one in which, incidentally, I was a clinical trial participant and right. Dr. Swaminathan ran the trial at University Hospital. That will be up before the same panel in a week's time. And shipments should follow before the end of the year. We don't know how much or exactly when any of this will be coming to New Jersey, but as Governor Murphy has said, this is real. There's a light on the horizon. And so I know people have so many questions about when it will be available and how safe it is. And so for that, we wanted to invite these 2 very distinguished experts to talk with us about it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Dr. Strom, let me begin with a very basic question that I think is on the minds of many ordinary people. How soon can the public expect to get this vaccine?
Depends on what part of the public you're in. The vaccination of healthcare workers and elderly patients in nursing homes will probably start next week.
Next week, really?
Next week, using the Pfizer vaccine. And it might be the week after, but it could be next week. As Lindy was talking about, our hospitals are already stocked to be able to start administering it. They will be phase 1A. Phase 1A will continue because there won't be enough vaccine. It'll probably continue until early January as well. Phase 1B will start bringing in everybody over age 65 and people as well with pre-existing conditions. Sure. So that would probably be mid to late January. And then, the public will start coming thereafter, higher risk people, and then the rest of the public. It'll probably by March or April, hopefully anyone who wants, and we're hoping everyone will want, will have access to the vaccine. The goal is really to have the entire state vaccinated by the end of the spring. So wow, That's the time frame.
That's quite an undertaking. By next summer, okay, or the coming summer, will we be back to our pre-pandemic normal, do you think? I mean, if the vaccine rolls out that quickly?
Unfortunately not, because not everybody's going to take the vaccine. It's clearly something we want. It's clearly something that would be useful. In order to achieve herd immunity, where you have a group of people who, enough people in the population vaccinated to really stop the spread of the disease. We don't know yet with this disease, but with most diseases, you need 60 or 70% of people vaccinated.
Do you expect we will be able to reach that goal here in New Jersey?
I really hope so, and that's really going to be, so the studies so far do not indicate that's the case. There's a hardcore of people who don't believe in any vaccination, and then there's other people who are skeptical about this vaccine because how fast it came out. Hopefully, the fact that it's first being released in healthcare workers, and we'll learn much more about its experience and how well healthcare workers want to take it, will help educate the public. And as more data comes out, I mean, the first Pfizer data just came out yesterday, released in anticipation of the FDA hearings tomorrow, and we'll see the same. And it's strikingly effective. And it looks, I mean, there's certainly short-term side effects, but there were essentially no serious side effects that were different in the exposed group from the placebo group. We'll hear the same thing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll hear the same thing next week as Lindy talked about the Moderna vaccine, because until now, all we've seen is press releases. So it'll be after tomorrow's these data released, and then the hearings tomorrow, and then the hearings next week. We'll have much more data to be able to discuss with the public and hopefully earn the public's trust appropriately.
Let me drill down a little bit on that safety issue. Dr. Swaminathan, how do we know that this is a safe vaccine?
So even though we've only seen press releases for the phase 3 data, it's critical to understand the clinical trial process. So participants were enrolled in the phase 1 study from Moderna. The first participant was March 16th. And these participants have been continued to be followed while at the same time studies for the phase 2 and phase 3 were ongoing. So the Data Safety and Monitoring Board has been reviewing these safety reports in a timely manner. In addition, all these clinical trials have an independent sort of protocol safety team that looks at these participant side effects. And at any point, if there's anything serious, clinical trials are paused. I think it's very encouraging that at this time between Moderna and Pfizer, there's been over 70,000 participants enrolled in both of these studies. And the Data Safety and Monitoring Board that have reviewed these data thus far have not revealed any signs of serious adverse effects beyond the ones that you would expect immediately after vaccination, such as local side effects, pain, soreness in your arm, some fever, headaches, etc. So I want to emphasize that the clinical trial process, while expedited because of the pandemic, has not been at the cost of participant safety because, the institutional review boards, the investigators, everybody's keeping a very close eye on it because we do want the vaccine to be safe, and we want to gather all the data and be as transparent as possible with the public.
That strikes me as a critical issue with physicians everywhere. But the poll data is showing that Americans are split on whether they'll even get the vaccine. What do you make of that?
Well, unfortunately, there are hardcore people who are against any kind of vaccine, and this has become politicized. The whole disease has become politicized, which is really problematic. So hopefully we can educate. Now that data will be coming out, hopefully we can educate the public so that they will know better. Shoba's comments are really critical that it wasn't stopped anywhere along the way. That's very reassuring that about serious effects. And this is a serious disease. So even if a serious vaccine effect emerges as it gets into larger numbers, it's not going to be as serious as the disease is.
Sure. I mean, Dr. Swaminathan, let me just turn back to you. You work in Newark at a hospital there. I'd like to talk perhaps about African Americans, for example, for historical reasons sometimes, and just general mistrust. Sometimes African Americans have been very leery about taking vaccines and that sort of thing. What are you seeing on the ground in Newark?
We have been doing clinical trials in Newark for many years, initially in HIV treatment and prevention, and now in COVID-19. And we have spent a lot of time and effort in ongoing community education and increased awareness, because you're right. There has been skepticism in communities of color because of Tuskegee and many other medical malpractice that have occurred in the past.
Sure.
I think
sure.
it's important that we emphasize that since then, science has evolved and clinical research is in a much different place now. We remain committed to community participation, to ensuring that the clinical trials follow good community participatory practices, to ensure that the clinical trials we offer ultimately benefit the community. Because when you look at the mortality and morbidity from COVID-19, it disproportionately impacts communities of color. And from what I can see, it's not because of any genetic predisposition. I think it reflects a lot of underlying social risk factors that put them at increased risk, because maybe they are more likely to be frontline workers. Maybe they are, and studies have shown they are much less likely for you to be able to work remotely. So these are all things that get factored, and I think we have to continue to educate them that this is an option. Participation in clinical trials is a choice that people make with once they get the appropriate information about the risk benefit. You always try to balance the benefit of possibly getting a vaccine or with the risk of side effects, with the risk of potentially getting COVID-19, which can be lethal.
Well, you may have answered my next question. I just thought to sort of broaden this group to a little bit, like, for example, Republicans who may think the disease is not so serious and they may not need the vaccine at all, or even others who may think that the process in developing the vaccines has been rushed or maybe even politicized. I mean, Dr. Swaminathan, you first. How do you answer folks like that? And if Dr. Strom, if you want to jump in at the end, feel free.
So I think you just have to look at the data. I mean, it's very good for us to feel the way we feel, but at the end of the day, COVID-19 has killed over 1.5 million people worldwide and over 250,000 people in the US. I mean, those facts speak for themselves. In the last week, a report came out that COVID-19 was the leading cause of death and caused more deaths than heart disease, which has never happened in this country. I think to think that those are just falsehoods and that's just death directly related to COVID-19. We don't know long-term what will happen, because as physicians, I see patients with long-standing lung disease, brain fog, and lingering complications that last well beyond the 1 week or 2 week illness people experience.
I think it's also important. Yeah, I think it's also important to emphasize and follow up on one of Shobha's comments. The development of these products was not rushed. The testing of the products weren't rushed. What made Operation Warp Speed work so much faster is a manufacturing issue, right? Instead, that is, the federal government basically went to the companies and said, even if it doesn't work, we guarantee we will buy the vaccine from you. Because normally a manufacturer doesn't start manufacturing the vaccine until it's proven that it works, because otherwise they're taking what could be a multi-billion-dollar risk. It got de-risked by the federal government. The federal government agreed to buy it whether or not it worked. And it turns out the first two at least work incredibly well. No one ever anticipated you'd have 95% efficacy. These are fantastic results.
Let me ask you both.
Can I just add one comment to that?
Sure,
I think
sure,
it's
go ahead,
really important as scientists that when you see two independently performing studies that give virtually identical results, it speaks to the veracity and how accurate that information actually is. And therefore, it makes me as a scientist really rely on the data, because we can see they're completely independent studies and they show the same thing, which is very reassuring for me and should be for the public as well. And
let me ask you both, Dr. Swaminathan and Dr. Strom, are you both planning to take the vaccine?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
I guess you probably answered that question already, but I just figured I had to ask it. Yeah, you're both planning to get it.
Certainly when it becomes available in my turn, which will be sometime in January, presumably. Yes.
Sure. Speaking of the safety, let me turn to my colleague, Lindy Washburn. Lindy, tell us about your experience with the vaccine.
I wanted to make a point also relevant to what Dr. Swaminathan was saying before I get to my own experience, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
Is that the participants in this clinical trial were also very diverse. And so these clinical trials were conducted in 89 sites around the country for Moderna, and probably an equal number because there were more participants in the Pfizer trial. And they made a particular effort to get people of color and people who were older like me, and people who had underlying conditions. And so there's been a diversity of subjects in the research to see what the effect would be. And the results have been strikingly good across the board, really. For my own self, I want to say that to become a participant, you have to go through a very long consent process where you're well informed of what the risks and benefits are. And so it's completely voluntary, and a person like me can withdraw at any time. I did not, I have not, and I received 2 shots 4 weeks apart. After the first shot, I had no reaction, and I was completely persuaded that I had had the placebo. I told everybody, well, I guess if it's approved, that'll be great because I'll get it. But if it's not approved, no harm done. And then 4 weeks later, I got the second shot. I was warned by the researcher and the nurse that some people had had a reaction. And in fact, the following day, I had a lot of soreness in my arm. I developed a fever, a low-grade fever. It went as high as 100.3 degrees. And I was really tired. I took a couple of naps throughout the day. That lasted 24 hours. And the following day, I was completely fine and have been fine ever since. Now, to me, who lives in North Jersey and has a neighbor who's a long hauler with after effects of COVID-19 and has lost friends to this disease and writes every day as a journalist about the effects on hospitals, and I write obituaries, this is a small price to pay, these fleeting and very low-grade side effects that I had.
That's very well put, Lindy. I know we all have some friends who we've lost to this disease, and others who have gotten sick and are still dealing with the after effects. We have a question here from a reader, and I just want to throw it out here to our 2 physicians. If you have allergies, can you get the vaccine? Number 1. And number 2, if you have asthma, should you get the vaccine? Any thoughts, Dr. Swaminathan?
Yes, because both clinical trials did include patients with allergies. And if you have asthma, that's actually an independent risk factor for getting worse COVID-19. So really, people with respiratory illness are considered high risk. So definitely should be able to get the vaccine.
So there wouldn't be any effects if you were what about if you're taking medication for asthma or other kinds of, health problems?
Now, the study did exclude people with select immunosuppressive conditions. For example, if you were organ transplant recipient or if you got high-dose steroids, primarily because it might be hard to assess the clinical efficacy in those participants. So it's possible that the vaccine may not work as effectively in those select cases because your immune system is suppressed. But otherwise, the clinical trials were pretty open and allowed most medications. We don't expect, this is not a medication, so there is no drug interaction per se.
So, Dr. Thorne, let me ask you to take a look at did you want to make a point?
Actually,
Go ahead.
Just one other caveat. The Pfizer vaccine started being given in the UK yesterday, and there were two people who had very serious allergic reactions. So I agree completely with Shobha said. Normal allergies, normal asthma, if anything, it's a reason to get the vaccine rather than avoid it. But they are recommending now that people who have serious anaphylactoid reactions, life-threatening reactions, very serious allergic reactions in the past, those people were excluded from the trial and probably should be excluded from getting the vaccine, at least up front until more experience.
What kind of an allergy would you be talking about here, do you think?
Anaphylactoid reactions are where you have difficulty breathing, your blood pressure drops in a life-threatening way. Right. Very, very serious reaction. And if you've had that before the vaccine, the desire is get it later. Wait. Let's have other people have more experience before giving it. So current recommendation in the United Kingdom with the Pfizer vaccine is that people have had these kind of extremely serious allergies, not normal allergies, not normal asthma. They should be getting the vaccine. But people have very, very serious history of life-threatening allergies shouldn't get the vaccine, at least for now.
I'm sorry to press you on this, but what would you consider to be a life-threatening allergy?
Blood, so serious that you're passing out, that you have difficulty breathing, you need to go to the emergency room to be able to be treated.
Would this be an allergic reaction to, say, a medication or some other kind of thing?
Yeah. It could be medication, it could be bee stings, it could be food, but it's life-threatening kind of reactions are the kind of reactions that people then shouldn't get the vaccine, just at least yet, just in case they might get it in the future.
Yeah, gotcha. I just want to press this point a little bit because so many people have allergies in our country today. What should people do? Should they consult their physician before they go to get a vaccine?
I think, again, normal people who have normal allergies, don't worry about it. Get the vaccine. If you have any doubts, talk to your physician. Whoever's going to be giving you the vaccine will have instructions who should be excluded and who shouldn't be excluded. But you could always talk to your physician. But I don't want to mislead people into, again, lots of people have allergies, lots of people have asthma. You should get the vaccine. But people who have had life-threatening reactions, who walk around, for example, with epinephrine pens and so on, are people who are the kind of people who should be careful.
Let me just switch gears, and Dr. Strom, I'll pose this question to you. We're looking at vaccinating here in New Jersey about 9 million of us, if everybody gets it. Can we really do this here in New Jersey? Are we set up to be able to do this?
We're not yet. Again, this is going to have to be pulled off very quickly. We are set up now to administer it to healthcare workers. So the hospitals are ready. As Lindy mentioned, our 2 teaching hospitals are already stocked, in fact, with it to be able to give it. The first wave, phase 1A, will be to healthcare workers and to people in nursing homes. And the CVS and Walmart are set up to administer it within the nursing homes. So the first wave we are ready to do. Between now and then, we need to gear up to be able to give it in large numbers of people. We're talking about, for example, mobilizing a lot of our pharmacy students, a lot of our nursing students, to be able to mobilize to help and give it in mass production. We're talking about drive-through injection sites, like there are drive-through testing sites, having drive-through, but all that needs to be finalized. And, this is moving very fast and needs to be finalized before it's ready to be administered.
Well, Doctor, I'm hearing that there's possibly a staffing issue here, and Dr. Swaminathan, if you want to jump in on this as well, is it a staffing issue or is it an equipment issue? I mean, do we have enough syringes, for example? Do we have, the other kinds of refrigeration facilities for at least the Pfizer vaccine, that sort of thing? How are we doing with the equipment? And then, if someone, you could also address the staffing issues as well.
So
Go
ahead.
Dr.
Strom, you go ahead. I think you're better. You know about the supply chain better than I do.
Yeah, certainly the supply chain needed for the Pfizer vaccine exists within the hospitals now, and they've geared up to be able to do it. And in fact, we've had offers from others to be able to help if we need it. We've mobilized at Rutgers, for example, some of our laboratory researchers with freezers as needed. But right now, it's not clear there'll be enough Pfizer vaccine to serve that purpose anyway. So in terms of and it's the Pfizer vaccine that needs the ultra cold, the supply chain. Hopefully there will be enough syringes and so on going forward. There's certainly no evidence of shortage yet, but until we test it, we won't know. Staffing is an issue. Healthcare, we have a problem with staffing in general in healthcare right now. After the first surge, people got sick, people dropped out. We have a difficulty in terms of maintaining staffing in our healthcare system, but we have a lot of people who can mobilize. Giving vaccinations is not hard. It goes back to my example, where we have a large number of nursing students, a large number of pharmacy students. They can all be mobilized to help and give it as need be. So all that remains to be worked out, remains to be tested. No one has ever given this many vaccines this quickly. Undoubtedly, there will be logistic issues that come up in the process. So I don't mean to give false reassurance, but certainly people are anticipating all these issues and trying to plan on them accordingly. The state health department has been fantastic in terms of planning for macro drive-through administrations, micro drive-through, office access, pharmacy access. In part, it depends on the vaccine. Pfizer has to be done at ultra cold. Moderna has to be done freezer. The AZ vaccine or the J&J vaccine may only need to be done in a refrigerator, and so it's different for each one.
Lindy, let me turn to you just quickly here. Where did you get your vaccine? I know you've written about this, but just remind our listeners where you got your vaccine.
Oh, I participated in the clinical trial at Hackensack University Medical Center in Hackensack. If I may, I wanted to bring up another question that I know a lot of people are wondering about, and that is, where do kids fit into this mix? And is it possible that this could be required for kids going to school as soon as next year? Dr. Swaminathan might be able to answer some of that.
So the Pfizer study expanded their inclusion criteria to include children of 12 years of age and older. We haven't seen the safety and efficacy analysis from those data. And I've also heard that Moderna and other pharma companies are planning studies in children. So I think those data remain forthcoming, and we will wait to see what those data show. With respect to your second question, will this be required for children to go to school? I'm not sure. I think this vaccinations will initially be offered to the school teachers because they will be considered frontline. Many of the epidemics or micro outbreaks have in areas that have schools open, have not necessarily been related to the schools, but through other kind of social networks. So I'm not sure that it would necessarily be a requirement, but I can certainly think that it's possible that schools may open in person at some point. And as long as they continue to maintain social distancing with face masks, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Schools may well be able to open without necessarily having to vaccinate all the kids.
Dr. Swaminathan, let me just follow up on Lindy's question about children. What about women who are pregnant, or even women who are considering getting pregnant? What should they do?
We just don't have enough information about the vaccine in pregnant women because, as we all mentioned, we want to protect the most vulnerable, and because of the lack of safety in pregnant women, initially pregnant women were excluded from all of these studies. Additional clinical trials will need to be performed to guarantee their safety in that population, because pregnant women are independently associated with, if they get COVID, have a higher rate of having complications from COVID-19. So try to keep safe and maintain social distance until we get that information.
What would you recommend? Let's say a woman gets pregnant in January. What would you recommend that she do?
Well, continue to practicing all this current social distancing measures, face mask, and I think if there's people surrounding her, spouse, partner, people that she's in contact with, if they can get vaccinated, that would be the best way so that they can protect her and the unborn baby from getting exposed to it.
So as Dr. Strom was talking earlier, Dr. Strom, would this create a sort of mini herd immunity, for example, in a family?
Well, that would be the hope, exactly, that it would decrease the spread of disease. Though even there, we don't know yet. No. We know the vaccine prevents spread in the individual, protects the individual. We don't know yet whether or not it prevents spread to other people. The AZ vaccine does. Those data were just published yesterday as well. But in terms of the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, you would expect it probably does, but it hasn't been proven. We will know by January or February accordingly. I also want to emphasize one of the comments Shobha made, not just for pregnant women, but more broadly. Washing hands, distancing, mask wearing, critically important. They will continue to be critically important. People shouldn't be relaxing those measures because a vaccine is beginning to be used. We're going to need to coexist with this virus for a good while. And so the public health measures are just as important and will continue to be just as important.
You're sounding like Dr. Anthony Fauci there, Doctor.
Thank you for the compliment. But
let me ask both our physicians, and Lindy, if you want to chime in here too. What do you think is the biggest hurdle here as we roll this out? We've talked about a number of things, but what is your biggest concern as this rolls out in New Jersey?
I think the biggest concern is vaccines don't prevent disease. Vaccination prevents disease. If people don't get the vaccine, it's not going to work. I think my second biggest concern is that people will relax the public health measures because they say, okay, now there's a vaccine, I don't need to do the rest of this. And they do need to do the rest of this.
Well, that's a good question. Dr. Swaminathan, should people still continue to wear masks for a while?
Yes. For the foreseeable future, social distancing, hand washing, face masks, vaccines are coming, but it's all these other preventive measures is really what will help us get through till such time as we have enough people vaccinated.
Well, when will we know? Do you think? I mean, this isn't like a soccer game or a football game, where the buzzer sounds and everybody leaves the field. When do you think we'll know that it'll be safe to take off our masks and maybe hug people again, that kind of thing?
I think we'll know about hugging people who've been vaccinated in the spring. Taking off face masks. I think it easily could be the summer or the fall before we even know what. Even so, because the disease isn't going to go away. If we achieve 70% herd immunity, 70% immunity, maybe we'll get herd immunity. There's some viruses that require 90% vaccination to get herd immunity. It's not going to make it go away. It's just going to make it the risk of transmission be much less. And it's worse because there are so many cases now. It's one thing if we started from a baseline of very few cases and you were vaccinating people to prevent its spread. We're starting from a case where there's a lot of cases, a situation where there's a lot of cases. And so it's going to be much harder to use vaccination to drive it down. And so we're going to be wearing masks and distancing for a while still.
Lindy, let me ask you a question. You've written a lot about this subject. What are you hearing from readers when you write about, for example, either your vaccine trial or perhaps the latest news about what's being done with vaccinations? What are readers asking you? Anything come to mind?
Well, I think there's a large degree of vaccine hesitation, and the fact that this was so remarkable and getting developed so quickly is also accompanied by the fact that it's a new kind of vaccine that hasn't been used before, the mechanism of making the body immune. And so people are willing, but they just don't want to be first. And so a lot of them are saying, well, thanks for doing this. And they really do grill me. And even though I'm kind of nonchalant and I say, well, it's been a month, of course I'm fine. They're like, really? You're really fine? So there is a degree of skepticism or hesitation there that I think we need to see some celebrities, some famous people get vaccinated and show that it's all fine with them. And then, maybe that will tip the balance and a lot of people will rush to join.
Well, let me ask a practical question, Dr. Swaminathan, maybe you can address this. If you get the vaccine, does that mean you won't get COVID?
So both the studies have shown that the vaccinations are 95% effective in preventing symptomatic COVID-19. And I know that sounds a little nuanced. Essentially, that means is you will not get symptoms of COVID like runny nose, a cough, fever, loss of sense of taste, etc. We don't know, as Dr. Brian Strom said, how effective this is with respect to shedding or asymptomatic shedding.
Right.
The AstraZeneca vaccine has shown data that it does, and it's certainly possible that both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine do the same, but we just don't have that information yet. So that's why we have to just wait to see what the data show on both of those counts.
In layman's terms, what would you recommend then that people do? Let's suppose I got the vaccine and I was around people who were infected for some reason. Let's say I came in contact with somebody who happened to be infected. Does that mean I'm safe?
It means that based on the study, you will not get seriously ill from COVID-19. It was 100% effective in preventing severe COVID-19. And there were very few cases in the vaccine arm, and those that had it had very mild cases of COVID. So I think that's what.
So I might be exposed to it, but I might not suffer a bad case. But could I then transfer the virus to someone else?
We don't know.
We are waiting to find that information to see if the vaccine exactly, because you hit the $1 million question, is will it prevent the transmission cycle?
So that's
unknown at this point.
Unknown. So even if you get the vaccine, you really should continue wearing a mask, because at this time, we don't have the information to tell you that, no, you will not transfer the infection. We just don't know that yet.
Well, Dr. Strom, what do you think? Is there a time when we will actually hear from our leaders and say, take off your masks?
Oh, I certainly hope so. We may be a year or two away from that still, though.
Really?
And part of it depends on how quickly people take the vaccine and how effective the vaccines are. These two first vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, are extraordinarily effective. It's wonderful news. Whether all the others that follow will be as effective remains to be seen. And the AZ vaccine also looks very effective, but on average was 70%, not 95%. So I think it depends on the data, but most of all, it depends on what proportion of people take the vaccine.
Let me ask a question to all of you. I'd like you to respond. Lindy, you first. Just from a societal point of view, how do we organize ourselves to sort of, abide by these rules? Who's going to be in charge? Is it going to be the local police department? Should it be just the advice of our physicians? How do we do this? Lindy, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if we take the vaccine, we're still going to have to abide by some of the social distancing and mask wearing rules. So how do we know how to navigate this landscape?
Well, we need leadership, and I think that leadership comes from both public figures and also from medical authorities and experts who are able, trusted experts who can tell us what's required.
Sure. Dr. Swaminathan, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think she absolutely hit it on the nail. I think it's a combination of leadership showing what needs to get done and also emphasizing. I think the skepticism behind vaccine is this perception of everything being rushed at the cost of safety. And I think we have to really hone in that, I think it's miraculous what we in this country and globally have been able to do by working together as opposed to against one another. We really have had a unique situation where we've had public-private partnership like never before. We've had all the government agencies working together cohesively as opposed to having bureaucracy being in the way. I mean, people have, leaped over mountains, crossed seas to get these things done appropriately, not cutting corners, but really facilitating way and making it safe so that we as scientists can actually get the job done and getting participants enrolled appropriately. So we have the data to show to the public that yes, based on the efficacy data, these vaccines are extremely effective, and so far the safety data are extremely encouraging. So we should absolutely get vaccinated.
Dr. Strom, I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, your question was who should people listen to? Is it police? Is it otherwise? I think the answer is public health officials. That this is really what public health is for. This is the responsibility of public health. It from a federal point of view, it would be CDC and other public health officials. Once CDC is no longer being censored for political reasons, and CDC works with state health departments work with local health departments. The job of those people is to take the kind of data that Shobha and I have been talking about. Again, we saw the first of them yesterday, first of those data from Pfizer. Read it, interpret it, and translate it into recommendations for the public to use. That's the recommendations people should be following, not political recommendations, but recommendations based on science, which is what they'll hear from the public health community.
Well, thank you. I want to thank our guests, Dr. Strom, Dr. Swaminathan, and my colleague, Lindy Washburn. For more stories on the pandemic and the vaccination process, please turn to The Record and to northjersey.com and the USA Today Network, New Jersey. For The Record, northjersey.com and the USA Today Network, New Jersey, I'm Mike Kelly. Thank you for tuning in.
Our pleasure.